What is a seemingly harmless parenting mistake that will majorly fuck up a child later in life? Story 1. I found that when my parents teased me about stuff I was clearly uncomfortable with, it made me tell them less later in life. I have a good relationship with my parents, but I don't tell them lots about my life because it's easier if they don't know or tease me about it. Story 2. Never saying sorry to your kids. My mom only just recently started telling me sorry when she gets worked up. It's built up such resentment for her over the years. I also have trouble saying sorry myself because of it. Tell your kids sorry, especially if you overreact to something they did. Story 3. Not following through with your promises. If you told your child you were buying ice cream tomorrow in the hopes that they'd forget, and the next day when they ask, you tell them no, then they'll see you as unreliable. Ice cream is just the first thing that came to my mind. I'm sure someone else can explain better what I'm trying to say here without sounding so ridiculous. Story 4. Never telling your child that you were wrong and that you're sorry. Just never once occurred. My father never once said I'm sorry to me. He was human. There were plenty of times he should have. My kids have heard from me plenty. Story 5. A seemingly harmless mistake is rewarding your child with something when they do something they already enjoy. Take, for example, reading. If a child just enjoys reading, let the child read without giving any reward. Once you start rewarding the child for that act, their intrinsic motivation gets replaced. It's called the overjustification effect. Story 6. In a different vein of thought, making finances a taboo subject. Financial illiteracy can be devastating once entering adulthood. Want to keep your children from making your own money mistakes? Don't be too proud to teach them what those mistakes were. To add to that, I don't mean robbing your children of their innocence by putting the weight of your debt on them at an early age, but rather teaching them how to properly budget their money as they earn it, how to build savings, what credit is, and how to responsibly manage it. Credit utilization, the danger of revolving balances, not using credit as an emergency fund. Teach them about predatory interest rates and the true cost of a loan. Set realistic expectations for costs of living, etc. Story 7. Don't smother your kids. My mom quit having her own life the moment my brother and I were born. She was an incredibly devoted and loving mother who was very kind to us. But when we were born, she stopped having friends, did not work, and was home every single day from when I was born to when I moved out in my early 20s. She was very easy to upset because she had no other source of self-esteem. And any time I screwed up, and I screwed up a lot, it was as if I had levied a very personal attack against her. In the last 5 years or so before I left, I don't think we had a single conversation that didn't drive her to tears, and I promise it wasn't that bad. I constantly felt cornered and stressed and fell into depression as a defense mechanism, and she took my resulting lack of performance very personally, creating a very treacherous cycle that was only broken when I enlisted and finally got away. To this day, I often feel like I'm a bad person who failed to live up to her love. Story 8. Not creating a safe space for your kids to tell their secrets and make mistakes. When I was younger, I excitedly confided in my mom about my first boyfriend. But instead of calmly talking me through this, she immediately brought my dad into the conversation and they both yelled at me and forced me to break up with him. Story 9. Not stopping when your child says stop. Whether it's teasing, tickling, or wrestling, kids who have parents that don't respect their boundaries always seem to end up being the biggest dicks and bullies because they've learned they don't have to respect other people's feelings. Story 10. Mocking them, laughing at them. Adults do it to each other all the time, but kids who haven't been immersed in the background cruelty of our culture for years don't understand that it's just the language of the land, and not that they themselves are particularly unworthy of respect. Story 11. Well, realistically, it'd be a helicopter parent. You always want to look out for your kid right, make sure they're not doing things they're not supposed to do, and walk in without knocking. It ruins a relationship with a kid because even though you have a sense of privacy, the kid doesn't, and will always be paranoid of anyone entering the room without warning. It ruins a kid. Would my mom let me do this? Is she okay with it? Story 12. Giving into your kids' wants and desires without upholding discipline and consequences will give your kids a large uphill battle to climb later. I say this because my parents babied me a lot when I was young. I never had to do anything I didn't want to do. Example, when I started getting bad grades because I wasn't doing my homework, my parents would have conferences with my teachers so they could give me extra credit. I had a rude awakening in college when I realized how hard life is. I 100% love and adore my parents. And who's to say if they did discipline me more that I'd have turned out any different? Probably not, but you never know. But when I have kids, I already know a few things I do differently. Story 13. Pretty much telling you that whatever activity that you enjoy doing is annoying or dumb. I used to love to sing. I was in the chorus and would play my favorite songs over and over to learn the words. Not only did my sisters tease me for it, but my parents told me to shut up constantly, so I stopped singing. It must have been terrible, right? I sing when I'm alone or jokingly with some friends. What really broke me was when I went to visit everyone for the holidays, and my sister said that she was surprised I never pursued singing since I seemed to love it so much when I was younger. I nearly started crying and had to bite my tongue so I wouldn't scream at her for being one of the reasons I stopped. It's always funny for the ones doing the teasing, but it actually hurts the ones being teased. especially when it's coming from the people who are supposed to love you. Story 14. When I was 4, my parents adopted a kitten. Of course, I had never seen anything quite so delightful before, and I could barely keep my hands off the little furball. So about 2 or 3 days passed, I get up in the morning and walk out and ask, "Where's the kitten?" And my parents told me that he died, implying that my roughhousing had killed it. I was terrified to touch an animal for several years thereafter. In fact, they had simply given the kitten back to the people they got it from. Story 15. Treating crying as if it's something only weak people do. My dad in particular used to yell at me for crying, which only made me cry more, which made him yell more, and you get the point. In high school, I tried to bring up the possibility of me having anxiety problems that I'd spoken to the school counselor about because my friends made me go since they were worried. He told me I was just a drama queen. I can't express that I'm anxious or stressed around my dad because others have it worse. Even now, I'm 21 and seeing a psychiatrist in a couple of weeks because I've just felt so bad lately, and I would never let my dad know. I think I'd rather die than my dad know I've been seeing a psychiatrist and discussing the possibility of me having OCD with a said psychiatrist, which does explain a lot and is actually kind of comforting for me to know, because he'd get so mad at me for being weak. Story 16. Making them give physical affection when they don't want to. If Uncle Bob makes them uncomfortable, don't make them give him a hug. If Aunt Karen freaks them out, don't make them give her a kiss. Of course, it's important that they be kind, but don't teach them that the feelings of others are more important than their bodily autonomy. Story 17. Never showing up for events. I remember my parents didn't come to most of my chorus concerts. It really sucked to see my classmates' families cheer them on while my parents were absent. I brought home one of my chorus program papers to show my parents, and I found it in the trash the next day. I was sad because I wanted to keep it, but seeing it in the trash, I didn't want it anymore. I love my parents and I don't blame them for not showing up. They're small business owners and it was hard for them to find people who could work for them whenever I had concerts or anything. It still hurt though. Also, my mom is a clean freak. She'll discard or move any stray papers laying around. She probably didn't think much of it, and she might not have even realized what it was. She can't read English that well, it's her third language. After I told her, she apologized to me, so it's okay. I thought I should add that my little sister and grandma would come to them, but my relationship with my grandma isn't great. It's just not the same as having your parents there, if that makes sense. Story 18. This is serious. I carry deep regrets over this. My kids were really wounded by my failing to properly memorialize the deaths of their sisters. We had 2 normal kids. Then my wife was pregnant and gave birth to 2 babies as a very late-term miscarriage. I held them and they were small babies. Charity's birthday is in 2 days. Hannah was born October 10. We thought we did all the right things. We took the remains and with our children, put one into the sea and another in a friend's lake. We talked about the loss occasionally, but we didn't do a lot of things we could have done. Memorialized their birthdays, Christmas ornaments for them, that sort of tangible stuff that kids can grasp. As it turns out, both of them grieved those losses deeply. They were 4 and 5 and we thought they barely understood it, but we were wrong. And it really wounded them and they exploded with anger and hurt at us a couple of years ago. We handled it well, we got counseling, we apologized, and we started correcting the course. Right now, neither of them really speaks to us. They cannot seem to forgive us for that oversight of not properly memorializing their sisters, and it's tearing us apart. We were so close, and now they're so distant and act so incredibly injured over this. And I'm a professional in an associated area, and so is my wife. We can't even grasp the depths of this loss from a professional, let alone personal perspective. So include your kids in these sorts of hurts and losses. That's my deepest regret as a parent. Story 19. In my experience, the inability to keep a conversation light and positive. For example, if I received an A on a test and I brought it up at the dinner table, within 5 minutes we would be having a tense discussion about some other class I should be doing better in, or it has turned negative on one of my siblings. Why the heck would I bother bringing something up if it's going to remind you of something you yell about regularly? In the same vein, the inability to withhold more important discussions for another time. My parents never considered planning a sit-down with me for a serious discussion about something I'm doing wrong, or did wrong. Rather, they'd spring it on me when I'm trapped in the car with them, or at the dinner table, or when I'm least expecting it or simply need to be doing something else. Important discussions were simply interjected into everyday life, and it led to me having bad anxiety and the inability to just relax around my parents. This may actually be part of some larger complex I have about my parents not having healthy divisions between themselves and other individuals. Like, they don't respect or acknowledge that their kids are fully separate people who think in different ways. If I was living in a way that disappointed my parents throughout my adult life, they would die young and allow it to take decades of their lives because they're so intertwined in other people's business. They would never think their adult children deserve the respect of like a coffee date or lunch in order to discuss a big issue. It would just be spewed out at the wrong time. They have no emotional intelligence and are the most judgmental people I've ever met. Story 20. This is probably going to be buried in the comments, but it is so important to me that I'm going to write it anyway. My parents unconsciously taught me to value external validation over everything else, and it has been the cause of persistent depression in my adult life. Examples that seem innocent. praising good grades and emphasizing academic achievement, being inordinately pleased when people said good things about me to them, encouraging me to apply for awards and scholarships, and them being super proud and boastful to others about how amazing I am, tacking up newspaper articles about me, certificates, etc. all over the house, writing Christmas letters that were essentially a laundry list of all my accomplishments, telling me that I could do anything I wanted or to be anything I wanted, that I was exceptional. I think you get the idea. All this taught me that I'm only worth what I can do. It has taught me that I'm only as valuable as others deem me to be. Outwardly, I appear poised and accomplished and successful. Inwardly, I have an exceedingly low, virtually non-existent sense of self-worth. I push myself constantly to do more and achieve more and earn more accolades. I burn out and have panic attacks. I feel numb inside. I don't know who I am or what I actually enjoy because I've been groomed only to do what others want of me. I'm almost 40 and basically completely lost. Story 21. Flex his fingers. Being overly rigid about table manners, to the point of physically correcting how your 19-year-old child is holding a fork over the age of about 12, timing your children's meals and taking their plates away if they go over time, mocking them for not knowing how to eat unfamiliar foods correctly. I get an eating disorder. My brother gets an eating disorder. Everyone gets an eating disorder. Spend more time dwelling on how evil and wrong premarital sex, dating, and the gays are than you do on "you are my child and I love you." A good way to make sure your son is fucking his girlfriend, who fortunately knows more about safe sex than he does because you never bothered to teach him. One of the daughters has a girlfriend, and the other is dating someone older than you are. And they all plan to get married sometime in the next 5 years without inviting or informing you, using anything they tell you confidentially against them. Want your kids to never trust you or anyone with personal information? Way to go! Making a really big deal out of them displaying the behavior you want. Oh wow, look everyone, Nina finally came out of her room. Wow, Nina, I bet that was really hard for you. By 16, Nina comes home only to sleep. Story 22. Trying to teach them a lesson, but actually just cruelly punishing or criticizing them with a veil of doing the child a kindness. My parents call me a bitch, as well as other expletives, and criticize my every behavior after each outing or social gathering. It's resulted in a deeply ingrained self-hatred complex, and I have no plans to continue to stay in contact with them after I'm no longer financially dependent on them. My parents would also yell at me and my siblings in front of our company to make sure everyone know how awful we were. They go from trying to be our best friends one minute to spending hours yelling or lecturing us for minute mistakes, when the only two people in your life who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who make you feel the worst about yourself. It destroys the way you believe you deserve to be treated. I was in an emotionally abusive relationship for months because I was used to being treated like that by my parents, and I genuinely thought it was okay. It took direct intervention from my best friends to wake me up and see the truth. Nobody deserves to have their parents verbally abuse them under the semblance of helping them, because it helps nobody. It only damages those receiving it. Story 23. Subtle pressures to follow societal expectations. I've had the fortunate experience to have some of the most amazing parents life could bring. They never forced me to follow any particular path in life. They made it clear that I am who I am and that there's nothing wrong with it. I was never told to be a man, or that's a little girly, or anything of the sort. And now I have an amazing relationship with them, and I'm very content in my current path to be an aerospace engineer. Also, lack of respect or privacy. Obviously, as a kid, they had to put their foot down many times, but overall, if I had an issue with the way they approached something, they taught me to go to them and discuss the issue civically. That gave me the tools to handle many situations where I'm interacting with someone in authority, teachers, police officers, etc., and with people in general, girlfriends, friends, family, etc. Final one. Taking mental issues seriously. My parents made it clear that it's okay not to be okay. They made sure that if I ever was depressed or anything, I could get help and they would make sure I was okay. When I was struggling with school in middle school, they were the ones who helped me go to the doctor, who then diagnosed me with ADHD. That helped immensely. Having them support me helped me realize that I could overcome whatever challenge I was dealing with, which led to me being able to get off the medication and function perfectly well without it. This attitude also helped me become more sensitive to other people's issues. My friends have anxiety, ADHD, depression, anger management issues, etc. They all know that they can come to me and talk, even if they just want to rant. Remember, kids often emulate their parents. Above all, show unconditional love and support. It won't go unappreciated. Story 24. Gender disappointment and expectations. Don't want a girl and get a girl? Get the fuck over it. You're a goddamn adult. This is an innocent child. Don't call her by the masculine form of her name instead of her actual name. Don't make her keep a boyish haircut and play boy sports if she doesn't want to. Don't punish her for your disappointment. To this day, I'm extremely uncomfortable with dressing and acting femininely or using my legal name. I definitely don't feel like I'm a boy, but I sure as shit don't feel comfortable dressing or looking the part of a woman. And I'm almost 30 years old. Swallow your hopes and dreams for your child and keep your mouth shut. What you want for your child versus what they want to do with their life are two different things. Don't force your wishes on them. They will rebel and hate you. I was never going to get an MBA and a degree in a foreign language, but that doesn't mean I'm not successful and don't have a fulfilling career. Don't guilt or cajole your child into fulfilling your dreams. You had your own life, your own choices, and your own chance. Let them have theirs. Your children are not an extension of you. They're their own people. You're there to help guide them to their hopes and dreams. My husband and I have always told our son, if you want to be a ditch digger when you grow up, we'll be just as proud of you as we would if you were an astronaut. All we ask is that you try to be the best ditch digger that ever was. Do whatever you love, but do it well. Thankfully, he seems to be a math whiz, but the support is always there, no matter what. Story 25. I know this is a little late, but I'll add my own personal experience to this. Show your kids that you're on their side, unless they majorly fuck up. I was bullied a lot as a kid and got into trouble because of the zero tolerance rules in school, and I can count the number of times my parents openly backed me up on one hand. The rest of the time, it was a stern discussion, me getting yelled at about how I shouldn't be getting in trouble, even if it wasn't my fault or even if I didn't fight back and came home bruised or bloodied. One of the times I got into trouble because I defended myself, and I was so scared of my parents getting upset at me that I tried to run out of the school to hide somewhere that they couldn't find me. I think I was about 7. It took me until I was in college to realize they always were on my side, and complained often to the school about how I was being targeted, but they just never told me or showed me, because they didn't want me to feel like it was okay to get into fights, even if it was in self-defense, because they didn't want me to get kicked out of school. Unfortunately, that was too late to find out, because now I have really deep-rooted fears of any form of confrontation, and I will literally avoid people if I think they don't like me or run away if I think they're mad at me. It's taken me 5 years to even start to work on it because even telling people about it in person triggers intense feelings of anxiety.